took the liberty of going to a site where they had conducted a survey asking those who opposed same-sex marriage to tell them what their main objection was, and they got statistics on what are the primary objections, and they rated them, and I took the top 5, and I'm going to hit them in reverse order. So this is starting with the least cited objection of the top 5 and working up toward the big one. Because we have some things to say about this. Now, first I want to directly address an issue which even we atheists sometimes argue about, which is, how come this is an atheist issue? And the fact is that most of the opposition to same-sex marriage is driven by religions. And whenever religions try to impose their sacred teachings on everybody in the country by way of law, that is when atheists will jump in and object. So here we go. First on the list, it's bad for the kids. If there are legal same-sex marriages, there will be children involved in some of those marriages, either because they're adopted or because they were the children of one of the two partners from a previous heterosexual relationship. 2% of people surveyed who object to same-sex marriage listed this as their primary concern. And, yeah, I want to address that too. 2% may not sound like a lot, but this is... Only 2% of them said this was their main objection. Practically 100% of people that I've spoken to about this subject eventually get around to raising this objection. Now, this can be broken down into 3 basic kinds of problems that these folks think will be caused for kids in whose parents are a married gay couple. The first possibility is that it might make the kids become gay. Now, even setting aside the whole question of whether homosexuality is genetic or the result of nurture, which is the claim that it is significantly the result of upbringing, is far from obvious from the scientific studies of this. Even setting that aside, this concern presumes that being gay is wrong and should be opposed, or the kids should be protected from it, which is really the same argument as the homosexuality is unnatural argument, which we'll get to later in this series of objections.
It also represents a great big fallacy in that, it presumes that it's possible by raising a child you could make them gay. However,
yep.
Those children who grew up to be gay from straight homes, obviously you've got an exception there. I mean, every one of those homosexuals, if it's completely nurture, had to come from some home, and since we're traditionally a straight home, you've got one path there. So obviously straight homes are actually promoting homosexuality.
A fine objection. I didn't go there with my response because those people who make this argument could say, well, what if it only, maybe you've got a, X% chance of a child growing up gay from a straight family, and a noticeable, though still small, increase in the odds of that if they're raised by gay parents.
Yeah.
And for them, they consider that still a bad thing.
And
they don't necessarily have to make the claim that the sexual preference of your parents equals the sexual preference of the kids.
And my response to them is always, prove it. Let's find out. Let's allow gay marriage. Let's see what goes on. Let's track it. Let's find out if all these bad things you say will happen actually do happen. Because if you look over, and you'll probably get to it, if you look over at other countries that have allowed it,
they're not falling to pieces.
They're not falling to pieces.
Yeah, but again, I think for my response to this, and we don't need to argue over this, I think you raise a good point. My eyebrow goes up more over the simple inherent bias in the idea that it would be bad for kids because it might make them gay. The bias is that being gay is somehow itself a terrible, horrible thing that kids need to be protected from. And that is just not at all obvious.
Matter of fact, you could make the argument that the only way you could say that it's a terrible, horrible thing is because of these monsters who are trying to continue to perpetrate the idea that it's a terrible, horrible thing.
I will get to that one in just a moment. The second angle that people take when they say that being raised by gay parents is bad for kids is that the fact that the parents are gay will cause problems for the family, right? That it's not accepted, that they will raise all kinds of issues, and therefore it's a less than desirable home life for the kids. The problem with this objection is there's all kinds of choices that traditional families make all the time that may cause problems for those families, but they choose to accept that they're going to face those problems. And we don't step in and deny them the right to be families just because of that. For example, a parent may join the military, leaving their kids without both parents for some period of time, and possibly permanently. And we don't disallow that choice by the parents. And there's all kinds of examples of that. So
one of my favorites, which tends to tie to this one, is interracial marriage, because this exact same argument was used to discourage interracial marriage for years. Oh, you wouldn't want to do that. I mean, I realize you love him and everything, but think of all the abuse you'll go through from living in the neighborhood of being, the only black girl married to a white guy, etc.
Right.
It's about, yes, it's true. You may suffer, some abuse and some criticism by your ignorant neighbors, but it's about changing social paradigms and ideas and allowing people to become more accepting of a variety of, choices.
Right. I would also remind those people who raise this particular objection that there is such a thing as child protective services. And there are such things as parents who are actually abusive or who are actually incompetent, and the organizations are in place, the structures are in place to deal with those kinds of problems when they occur, whether the parents are gay or straight. So even raising the specter of, maybe it'll cause problems with the parents, it's not really our business unless the parents are actually abusive or incompetent. And if they are, it doesn't mean you don't let them be parents. It means Child Protective Services deals with it.
And single people can be parents. Just because you're saying they can't get married doesn't mean they're not going to adopt. I mean, Rosie O'Donnell was single and adopted a number of kids.
Excellent point. And finally, this is sort of getting into the territory you were just discussing, and I broke it off as a separate issue, that being raised by gay parents will subject kids to ridicule, right? But we have a phone going off in the studio. Objecting to gay families on the basis that their kids will face prejudice is itself an example of that prejudice. The problem that we ought to be addressing is the prejudice, not the gay marriage, right? You don't make something, you don't justify disallowing some behavior by saying, well, I can't handle it. I can't treat those people fairly if you let them do that. That is your problem to behave yourself, not your right to deny them. Okay, so next major objection to same-sex marriage. The purpose of marriage is to have children. 4% of people surveyed said that this objection was their primary one. Again, even though it's only 4%, practically everybody I've ever talked to about this, when you start picking apart their arguments, will eventually get around to this one. And it is immediately shot down because this objection is not raised in the case of infertile couples or elderly people who want to get married. These are clear cases of heterosexual people who are not going to be having any kids from their marriage, and yet nobody steps in and disallows them.
Yeah, it's not raised in any case other than homosexual.
No, so this objection is merely hypocritical and completely irrelevant. Agreed?
I'm with you.
That's the shortest one.